Our journey begins at Hyde Park Mansion, the summer home of the Vanderbilt family, on the Hudson River about 100 miles upstream from New York, which is just one of the many great houses overlooking the river. Heading south, we take in West Point Military Academy, as well as a famous golf club and a notorious prison facility. At Sleepy Hollow, we take a look at the old Dutch church in Washington Irving's creepy tale, before looking at two more 19th century mansions. The river then takes us down to the city that never sleeps, New York. The Hudson River flows for 315 miles through New York and is named after Henry Hudson, who explored it in 1609. In the late 19th century, during what has become known as the Gilded Age, many beautiful large mansions were built for wealthy industrialists along the river. Hyde Park Mansion, with its 54 rooms, was home to Frederick William Vanderbilt and constructed in the Beaux Arts architectural style from 1895. It was designed to be a seasonal country residence. The house was very modern at the time and used concrete and steel in its construction. Electricity came from a private powerhouse, and the house even had hot air central heating. The original estate was around 600 acres, but in 1938 much of the land and the mansion were donated to the National Park Service. 2 miles downriver is the Springwood Estate, which is the birthplace, home, and burial place of the 32nd President of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt. The estate was bought by the president's father in 1866, who then enlarged the house. It was further enlarged in 1915, so that the yet-to-be president could entertain his political friends. He designed the two wings himself, giving the house a colonial revival style. The Roosevelt Library, close to the house, was the first presidential library built in the United States and was designed by the president himself in 1939. The Hudson River is still a busy waterway and navigable for much of its length. With the opening of the Erie Canal further upstream, goods could be transported between the city of Buffalo and the Great Lakes and the port of New York. The success of the waterway led to industrial growth along the river during the late 19th century. However, serious pollution problems of raw sewage and industrial waste followed, and it was only from the 1960s that anti-pollution legislation finally came into force and the clean-up effort could begin. Environmental protection was also important for the landscape overlooking the river. The Hudson Highlands was saved and became a state park during the mid-20th century, as previously the area had been heavily logged and mined. Today, the 6,000-acre park, with its proximity to New York City, is a popular destination for day hikes. Just downstream is the United States Military Academy at West Point, and the oldest of the 5 such academies in the United States. It was founded in 1802 with the motto, Duty, Honor, Country. On the hill above West Point is Fort Putnam, completed in 1778 to protect the Hudson during the Revolutionary War. It was later enlarged, but had gradually fallen into disuse by the mid-19th century. Around 65,000 cadets have graduated from West Point, including several household names: Custer, Lee, Sherman and Meade from the Civil War. From World War II, MacArthur, Bradley and Patton. And also 2 presidents, Ulysses S. Grant and Dwight D. Eisenhower. George Washington is celebrated as America's first commander-in-chief, who won independence for America before the Academy was founded. In West Point's history, there have been 74 recipients of the Medal of Honor, the highest award for bravery in the United States. On the opposite bank of the Hudson is the first railroad track to be built in the state of New York in 1831. The line was originally called the Mohawk and Hudson Railroad and was built by Frederick William Vanderbilt, whose house we saw earlier. In 1853, the line became part of the much bigger New York Central Railroad. Today, diesel locomotives carry commuters to and from Grand Central Station in New York on a 75-mile scenic stretch of track, much of it running right next to the river. In 1996, the Hudson National Golf Club opened up on the site of an old estate downstream from West Point, and the mansion easily converted into the clubhouse. The 260-acre site, which now ranks in the top 100 golf clubs in America, offers unrivaled views over the Hudson River. The club is unusual in that players have to walk the course and only have use of a golf cart if over 60 years of age or physically infirm. A very different sort of club is a few miles downriver, and one that you don't really want to join: Sing Sing Correctional Facility. This maximum security prison came into being in 1824. Over the years, there have been 614 executions, but in 1972, the death penalty was finally declared unconstitutional in the state of New York, and the electric chair was removed. Today, the prison houses around 2,000 inmates. In 1996, North Tarrytown was renamed Sleepy Hollow, when residents voted to have it changed to honor Washington Irving's story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, published in 1820, which was set in the town. The story is still in print today. Over the decades, the legend has been made into several films, including Tim Burton's version in 1999. In The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, the cemetery and Old Dutch Church, which is the oldest church in the state, feature prominently in the tale, where Ichabod Crane, the new schoolmaster, competes with a rival for the hand of Katrina Van Tassel. When he leaves a party at the Van Tassel house, he rides his horse, Gunpowder, towards a wooden bridge close to the church and cemetery, where he sees the headless horseman on the other side. Irving writes, "In the dark shadow of the grove, on the margin of the brook, he beheld something huge, misshapen, black and towering. It stirred not, but seemed gathered up in the gloom, like some gigantic monster ready to spring upon the traveller." Ichabod was never seen again. But who was the horseman? An evil spirit from the past in search of his head? Or was it Ichabod's rival? The Legend of Sleepy Hollow leaves it up to the reader to decide. On a hill above Sleepy Hollow is one of New York State's most famous houses, built for the industrialist John D. Rockefeller, who had made a fortune in the oil business. Commanding wonderful views over the Hudson, it is named Kijkit, derived from the Dutch word meaning lookout. The classical revival house took 6 years to complete and was finally finished in 1913. It's 6 stories high, with the 2 basement floors housing all the service rooms, as well as delivery tunnels and interconnecting passageways. The garden is laid out in a series of terraces, and in the park, mature trees were transplanted at huge cost and placed into prominent positions. The house is now open to the public and a National Historic Landmark. In 1952, construction began on the Tappan Zee Bridge, across the Hudson at its second widest point. It's the first bridge upriver from the city of New York. Because it was built at a time of material shortages during the Korean War, it was only meant to last for 50 years. But together with an increase of traffic that was never envisaged, the cantilever bridge is beginning to deteriorate, and a new bridge is planned. Half a mile from the bridge is a Gothic revival house begun in 1838 and today called Lyndhurst. The original house was smaller and given the nickname Polding's Folly, after its builder, William Polding, because of its unusual architectural style. The second owner, George Merritt, a successful businessman, doubled the size of the house in the 1860s and named it Lindenhurst, after the linden trees on the estate. In 1880, the house was purchased by railroad tycoon Jay Gould, who added the first steel-frame conservatory in the United States, replanted the park, and called the house Lyndhurst. The house is still privately owned. Perhaps one of the most unusual properties to be built during the Gilded period of the late 19th century is this domed octagonal house, the Armel Steiner House. It was named after its first two owners, Paul Armour and Joseph Steiner. Paul Armour built the octagonal house in 1860, but without a dome. That was added by the second owner, Joseph Steiner, in the 1870s. He also enlarged the house, creating what we see today. The design may well be unique in America, and its exuberant style led to it being described as the Taj Mahal of the Hudson Valley and a pastry chef's nightmare. In 1976, the house was declared a National Historic Landmark. Our journey is fast approaching the city of New York, and the river becomes a transport system for commuters. Alongside the river and on the border with New Jersey is the Palisades Interstate Parkway, a major route in and out of the city and now designated a national landmark. Construction began just after the Second World War in 1947 and was completed 10 years later. The Parkway takes its name from the New Jersey Palisades, a line of cliffs on the Hudson. And behind the cliffs is the silhouette of one of the best-known and best-loved cities in the world, New York. With special permission from New York's Air Traffic Control Center to climb to 5,000 feet, the whole of Manhattan is set out before us. Manhattan is one of the 5 districts of New York City, the others being the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. But Manhattan, the smallest of the 5, is the most densely populated and the heart of the city. It's a major commercial, financial, and cultural center of the United States and the world. This awe-inspiring site, with its myriad of high-rise buildings, looks simply spectacular from the air. So, one of the best ways to see New York, without doubt, has to be by helicopter, and several companies operate passenger flights around the city. Some of them will include flying out to the Statue of Liberty, surely one of the most famous statues in the world. The gilded flame held aloft by the Statue of Liberty has been a symbol of freedom to millions of people around the world for over 120 years. The statue was to be a gift to the people of America from the people of France in 1876 in recognition of the friendship forged during the American Revolution, and also to celebrate the centennial of the Declaration of Independence. It was agreed that the base would be funded and built by America and placed on what is now Liberty Island. Following years of hard fundraising in both the US and France, the statue eventually arrived in New York in 1885. The 350 individual pieces were packed in 214 crates and took 4 months to assemble on the new pedestal. On October the 28th, 1886, the dedication ceremony took place in front of thousands of spectators. And in 1984, the Statue of Liberty was declared a World Heritage Site by the United Nations. Close by is Ellis Island, the gateway for millions of immigrants arriving in the New World, and where roughly half the population of America can probably trace their families back to. The centre operated between 1892 and 1954, and the small island was gradually enlarged through landfill until 9/10 of it was artificial. It is now a much visited museum. Tourist boats crisscross the harbour along with various ferries, including the distinctive orange Staten Island ferries, which pass Governor's Island. The name goes back to a time of British rule when the island was the exclusive preserve of New York royal governors. Bridges are a distinctive feature of New York, and the Verrazzano Narrows Bridge straddles the entrance to the harbour and joins Staten Island to Brooklyn. The bridge is named after the Italian explorer Giovanni da Verrazzano, who was the first European to enter the harbour in 1524. It was completed in 1964 and at the time was the longest suspension bridge in the world. In 1883, the Brooklyn Bridge was the longest suspension bridge in the world, as well as the first to be built of steel. The pedestrian walkway offers great views of the city and bridge. It took 16 years to build and claimed the lives of 20 people, including its designer, John A. Roebling. Most died of caisson disease, known today as the bends, after coming up too fast from the caissons below the East River. The George Washington Bridge is the first to cross the Hudson and connects Washington Heights to Fort Lee in New Jersey. The double-decker bridge was completed in 1931 and has 14 lanes for traffic. By the year 2007, the bridge was carrying well over 100 million vehicles a year. Also along the Hudson River is the New York Passenger Ship Terminal, which is also known as Luxury Liner Row. Before the age of air travel, this was where passengers would arrive in the great ocean liners from around the world. Even today, around 1 million people arrive by ship each year and get superb views of the city before docking. The East River separates Manhattan and Brooklyn on Long Island, and was the busiest shipping channel in the early part of New York's history. The Williamsburg Bridge was built in 1896, 13 years after the Brooklyn Bridge. Overlooking East River is the United Nations headquarters, built in 1950. The land it stands on is considered to be international property. A mile upstream, and the river forks right under Hell Gate Bridge, before widening out at LaGuardia Airport and Rikers Island, New York City's main jail complex. The Harlem River forms part of the Hudson Estuary system and serves as a narrow channel dividing the Bronx from Manhattan. And over this short stretch of river are 14 bridges. Close by are the old and new Yankee stadiums, the furthest away built in 1923 and the nearest in 2006. The best-known open space in New York must be Central Park. This 770-acre open space was completed by 1873 and is the most popular park in the United States. One of its creators, Frederick Olmsted, said that it was of great importance as the first real park made in this country, a democratic development of the highest significance. It took 16 years to create and involved planting around 500,000 trees and shrubs. Lakes were dug, hills created, follies built, formal gardens laid out, and bridges constructed. The only building encroaching into the perfect rectangle is the Metropolitan Museum of Art, begun in the 1870s. At the southern end of Manhattan is the financial district, which roughly overlaps the original New Amsterdam settlement of the 17th century. And right on the end is Battery Park, where the Dutch and then the British had an artillery fort. The district is home to major financial institutions, including the Federal Reserve and the Stock Exchange. It was also home to the Twin Towers until the tragedy of 9/11. And that appalling event meant that the Empire State Building was once again the tallest skyscraper in New York. It was built in the Art Deco style in 1931 and is still the 15th tallest building in the world at 1,250 feet. It was opened in dramatic fashion when President Hoover pushed a button in the Oval Office in Washington and turned the lights on. New York comes alive at night, and nowhere is it more brightly lit than around Times Square. Back in 1899, Oscar Hammerstein built the Victoria and Republic theatres, and since then Broadway has been at the heart of entertainment. Theatre-goers take in a show and then eat and drink in one of the many bars and restaurants. The bright lights welcome everyone, ward off the darkness, and produce a city where everything seems possible. New York is known as the city that never sleeps, a saying taken from a film of 1924. Even the traffic contributes to the lighting effect along the streets, like long, multicoloured, glowing ribbons. Buildings are lit with neon hoardings, and some of the skyscrapers are lit like works of art. None more so than the Chrysler Building. For many people, this is the greatest Art Deco building in the city, and was completed in 1930. At night, the distinctive V-shaped lights, which were fitted when the skyscraper was being built, have become an iconic sight. The floodlighting was added later. Seen from the river, the city resembles a magical ocean liner set against a black sky to dazzle, entertain, and amaze. Great walls of glass sparkle in the night as the skyscrapers reflect the light from the streets of the city that never sleeps. And out in the harbour, the Statue of Liberty watches over the city, her light shining out for the freedom she represents. A perfect place to end this journey.